Hey, what's going on? Welcome to the Doug Show. And I'm pumped today because I get to talk to one of my, podcast superstar mentors from afar, Dan Andrews, one of the hosts over at the Tropical MBA podcast, which I started listening to right when I got started in 2013. And I haven't stopped downloading all the episodes. So it's a pleasure. And today we're going to talk about where the business is at today. We're going to look at pivoting and growing your business while you're traveling and enjoying a great lifestyle business. So we're going to dig into all the details. And Dan, how's it going today?
Going great, Doug. I want to remind the audience that I'm a Doug.Show listener. And I don't know how I became one, but I think it was because I was tracking down alpha in the niche website space. And so it's mutual. That's the point.
Awesome. And when we were just chatting before, and I was like, I got to invite you back on because we haven't actually met in person, but it feels like, chatting with an old friend, we pick up where we left off, even though we've only talked a handful of times. But the podcasting format makes it feel like I really know you like a friend.
Yeah, likewise. It's I something about my friend earlier today was saying, what do you got going on today? I got this interview with Doug. He runs this show called the Doug.Show. I really love it. And he's like, why? And I was like, well, because it's no bullshit. And I like when I can hear something that's really close to the ground. And I was like, he's got this community where he's sharing these case studies. He's showing you the path as legibly as possible. And I think in our industry, there's a lot of distance between the kind of media and the reality. And I think what the Doug Show does for me is like the media is very close to the reality. It's never going to be one-to-one. But I really like that about this community and this show. So that's why I was like excited to come on. I don't know if I'll be able to be the same way you are, but I'll try.
Thank you. I will take that compliment.
I hope that makes sense.
Yes. And that, honestly, that's what I'm going for. And from, I don't come from a performance background or anything like that, but no bullshit and just the facts. That's the best way for me to do it and deliver the message. So I appreciate that, Dan. And let's hear your story now. I'll open it up and just kind of let you give 90-second, couple minute intro. But I will remind people that we did an interview back. I think it was like lockdown COVID timeframe, so people can hear a little bit more of your background there. But what do you do? Where'd you come from? What's the business kind of look like today? And then we'll unpack the business portion coming up.
Yeah, for me, it was niche SEO marketing combined with manufacturing was the nexus of insights that drove me to this idea of like a lifestyle business. And the concept that, well, if I ranked within the top 5 on Google for modern cat furniture, I could sell enough units based on my manufacturing costs in California that, I could live the dream in Bali, or I could travel. I could get out of my job. And so we pursued that goal starting in 2006. We started sharing our journey in 2009 vis-a-vis a podcast similar to this. And that has since turned into a business many, many years later that has a lot of products for founders, things like recruiting, events, private membership, stuff like that. So that's kind of like, the timeline of the last 15 years.
And people might think that you came up with the cat furniture thing as a weird example that isn't true, but you guys legitimately had a cat furniture business. Is that right?
Yeah, and it kind of came full circle. We had a cat furniture business called moderncatdesigns.com. And I don't know, it probably wasn't the best business for us to be running. We didn't, really understand the industry that well. It was B2C, which is challenging. Now I'm more of a B2B kind of guy, all things being equal. But recently I had a young affiliate marketer on my show who bought my arch nemesis. Like, everybody has a nemesis. You go online and you type in modern cat furniture, and it was like us and then this brand named Hepper. And I was like, I don't know who this Hepper guy is, but he's got to go down, It turns out that this guy's name was Jed, and he's super cool. And I ended up meeting him at conferences, and we became friendly. And he sold Hepper to an affiliate marketer who lives in Chiang Mai named Simon Trulay. And he runs a website called, he runs a media brand called Pangolia, which he's the right owner for that, because he's, I think your listeners would be really interested to hear about his story and to look at his brand, because he's an SEO genius, and you can learn a lot by deconstructing what he's done with Pangolia. So that's kind of a full, not just a funny example, but actually was in the cat furniture business.
Very cool. Okay. And that's a lot of years and, working online just generally. And
yeah,
I think I would love sometime, we'll table it maybe, but you started your podcast in 2009. We could do a whole podcast talking about podcasts, but do you go deep into like the industry side of podcasting and like go to conferences? Are you like looking at the craft, or did you come at it from sort of a different angle?
There was no craft. There was no industry. There was no nothing for so long, So I was already, over the hill by the time it became a thing to do. And so I've never gone to any of those conferences, although I would love to. I think the concept of maybe a 30-person conference where you had to have a certain sort of engagement or a certain level of community or revenue, where everybody would swap notes. There's some people I saw Jay Klaus is doing something with his Creators Academy, stuff like that could appeal to me. I would be really interested in that. But no, I've never really, I've just sort of been an observer, watching on the sidelines, and a fan mostly. I'm a big listener of podcasts.
Okay. Very interesting. Yeah. Podcast movement was just last week here in Denver. I didn't go to it. I was out of town, but it's open for everyone. And there's a lot of kind of big corporate sponsors in there. So someone I know said that it felt like a lot of the speakers were just advertisers in some capacity. And your point of having like a minimum threshold, it keeps out the beginners so that you, as a podcasting veteran of 14 years, like you don't need a lot of the beginner stuff. Like you don't need to know about equipment or some other things like that. You could just learn from your peers and contemporaries and that sort of thing. So, okay.
There are some things that I think maybe me and you and a lot of the listeners understood intuitively that I've only recently heard people say more forthright, which is, a podcast listener is worth so much. In terms of value, in terms of the time they're giving you, and in terms of engagement. Like if you go on a podcast and you say, yo, I'm Doug, I'm going to be in Boulder in 2 months, and I invite you, if you listen to this show, to come to Boulder, and here's what we'll do. That's going to perform enormously well. And that's something that I think we've seen. It's been intuitive. Like if you make it onto the 4 to 6 podcasts that people cycle through on their phone, the average podcast listener, that's an enormous privilege, and it's an incredibly powerful relationship. And I can say that because I'm primarily a listener. Like I will do what the Doug.Show says or what these other shows that I love. I can't wait for the episodes to come out, and I understand that. And it's pretty cool to be a part of that as part of our business.
Agree 100%. So let's shift into what your business looks like today. So there's a couple different pieces. So can you break that down for us?
Sure. I don't know if I should start with the Jim Collins flywheel, or the different elements are our marketing department is a sad and lonely place. It is me, like a $90 microphone, and the occasional tweet. I also send out a newsletter. So that's our marketing. We have a private community, which you have to qualify and apply for. And that is marketed by a little bit of the podcast and a little bit of word of mouth. And that has 1,200 members now. We have now a new community, which is in partnership with that, which is reserved for 7-figure companies and beyond. We now have 60 members, and that's like in, I guess, beta. We just opened it, so we're kind of experimenting and seeing what works for those initial 60. We have a recruiting firm that services a lot of the people in the membership and other companies as well. And then we also have a job board, which helps people find remote jobs. And the final piece is we do a bunch of events. And in order to go to the event, you have to be a member. So I don't know how to position that, whether that's its own product or whatever, but we have about 40 meetups every month amongst our memberships. That could be anything from 3 people in Denver having a sandwich to, a lot of people going on a boat somewhere in Asia, to member-led events all around the world. We do about 10 of those a year, larger events. And then we do a handful of events that have, over 60 members up to 400 members in Bangkok here in a few weeks.
Okay. So several pieces here, of course. Can you quickly name each of the pieces? So the membership, the elite membership, the recruiting, job board, just so people can go check these out and understand what they are.
Got it. So it's Tropical MBA as a podcast, Dynamite Circle as a community, DC, or AKA the DC Black, like the American Express Black Card, is the higher level community. RemoteFirstRecruiting.com is our recruiting firm, and DynamiteJobs.com is the job board.
Okay. And for the events, you have to be a member to go to any of the events. So, and that's it's connected-ish, but that's a significant part of the business.
It's a significant part of the business strategically, which we're now kind of recognizing more, and also from a revenue perspective, because we charge for the events.
Got it. So externally, I mean, I know of you guys and I know these pieces of the business, but externally, if someone came in and you said, we're doing all these things, it seems like there's a lack of focus and there's a lot of disconnected stuff. Any response to that where you're like, if I was like, hey, why aren't you focusing on, the biggest moneymaker or the thing that you're most passionate about that align with your values, or however you want to assess it?
It's funny, right before you said that, I was like, I'm starting to feel like I'm walking right into a business coaching session. This is amazing because this shit costs a lot of money. I think you're right. And that's something that the team, we've been discussing. We have all these logos everywhere, So I do think that, yes, we have a lack of focus for sure.
And I mean, if it's working for you, great. That's awesome. Which, I mean, I think it is, but I do wonder, like, when I was researching for this, I was like, okay, I want to make sure I understand all the pieces before I even ask the question, right? And I was thinking, hey, there's a lot of logos. And it's like, it is all connected, right? I understand the thread where you're like, there are a lot of people that are interested in these businesses in the membership. So it's like you're serving the community, which makes complete sense. And I see how it works personally. But yeah, it's like, it's pretty scattered. Now, that said, many companies have a lot of pieces and they run fine. They're very profitable, but they have a team. They have someone who is, they own a certain piece. So what does your team look like?
So there's 12 of us that are full-time. And to your point about focus, I did reorg the company over the new year. And primarily, this was actually a big challenge. So here was I think it's something you flagged up on our previous interview. Our job board, for example, Dynamite Jobs. If me and you were to become business partners and just run that, I don't think that going after the target market of our podcast and our community would be the best customer to pursue necessarily in order to grow that business to scale. Me and you would sit in a strategy session and say, you know what, mid-market is probably where job boards have the most success. And so we're going to continue to drive that way. And so that's what we were doing. We had people driving towards mid-market at a job board. The recruiting people were doing recruiting stuff, community people doing community stuff. And at a certain point, I thought, we can't operate like this because lack of focus is one thing, but how that manifested on the ground was lack of an ability to compete with the personnel and the investment level. So I was thinking to myself, like kind of a rather simple realization, which is I was like putting people in place to do jobs, like, and typically not experts or professionals that I wasn't quite sure how to do myself, but to see what would happen is more like a little bit of a wager. And I think that was a bit of a pitfall I fell into. And I think the people that you hire and pay their salary, they'll kind of do what you suggest. So you have to be careful and check it by in situations like this. So the reorg was essentially, I know for these brands that it seems in theory like it would be better to get a different customer set. But we are going to forgo that altogether and instead 100% focus on our core customer. We're going to define them. We're going to clarify who they are, and no one's going to lift a finger in this company unless it's for that target market. And if it turns out that, say, for example, our recruiting product, which actually is a really nice fit with our target customer, if they don't want that, fine, we'll do something else. It's a customer focus instead of a product focus. And so although there are a lot of logos, the company focus is now 100% on the user or the target ICP, as they say in the business jargon, ideal client profile, versus doing what that brand or ideal company would do in a vacuum. And so, sorry to cut off the point, and I think what you're driving at, which is like the hardest thing in any business at like less than $5 million is finding a repeatable source of customers. That's the number one challenge. And we had cracked that nut. And so it was really hard for me to like attend meetings where people were trying to like re-crack the nut. And I'm like, no, man, this is like so hard in the first place. We're not going to like bet on having like you do it a second time. We're going to stick with the first group of customers and we're going to build product for them.
Okay, man. Well,
does that make sense?
It does. And it's a different way to look at it than, when most people walk up, they're like product focus versus the customer focus, where you know who you want to serve and you're adaptable to pivot a little bit, which is a topic we'll come up to in a second, but pivot as needed to serve that customer better. If you miss the product just a little bit, but those are the people you want to work with, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. I mean, maybe if you're building an affiliate site, it's like the difference between writing what you want versus writing for the algorithm, something like that. Like just understanding how expensive a channel is, how expensive a repeatable source, and can you compete? Can you earn customers? And really drilling down into how much it costs you to earn a customer. And then realizing like that repeating that with a division, we even call them divisions, just was like a financial disaster, And so we leaked a lot of cash basically trying to develop new sources of customers. And so basically reorged the whole thing. It ended up being a lot of staff changes actually.
Gotcha.
That was a big part of it. Just, business coaching, which was very valuable to me. Lots of mural boards, like mapping out the systems in the company, rating them based on health, putting actual numbers and goals next to everything. And it became pretty clear that, around sort of October, November timeframe last year, that we were going to reorg the company to be customer focused versus product focused.
Okay. So you said about 12 people, and is there some more complicated org chart? Is it pretty flat? A couple of managers in there? How does it work?
It's pretty flat. I mean, everybody has a clear area of responsibility. We have functional areas in the company, like the community team, the recruiting team, the events team. And we have a meeting every week for each functional area. We have an executive, sort of a leadership team as well. And it's pretty simple though. It's just 12 of us.
Okay. Yeah, it doesn't get to be too many communication channels. Do you have any freelancers or contractors that work on the team as well?
All that. Yeah. The sort of freelance mafia sort of orbits each. Yeah.
How many people is that?
I mean, we have seasonal staff. So for example, at our event in Bangkok in a few weeks, there'll be 25 people on the ground that are part of the team. We also have because if you run a community, to a degree, your customers are part of your team. And so getting a strong sense about that. And then I would say like regular people who freelance with us, probably about 6 or 7.
Okay. Got it. I was chatting with a couple of my friends, 3 people that developed a WordPress theme. And my background is project management. So I was asking, how do you guys assign the roles and responsibilities so that there's no duplicate work or things that are missed? And they said, oh, we haven't done any of that. And it's getting a little frustrating. But yeah, so they were just kind of flying blind. Some people were, they'd get a support ticket in, 2, 3 people would answer the question. So there's a lot of waste. It sounds like you guys have it ironed out pretty well in your organization. Roles and responsibilities very clear so that nothing's dropped, right?
More or less, yeah. We do drop things, but I think the systems are decent. Sometimes the performance is, I'm like kind of a fan of minimalist management, which is to say that if you're expecting a system to save someone who can't work hard or, then probably not I would like over-index on people who are competent at the role that they're in.
Agree. And micromanaging is no fun. I'd rather like set someone free, and then if they fuck it up or something, then you have to do something about it, and then maybe fix it up or replace the person. But totally. Yeah. So let's talk about pivoting here, because in the pandemic timeframe, we didn't know what was going to happen. And like I said, I think we talked in April of 2020. So we were isolated. We didn't know what was going to happen. A good chunk of your business was events, and that sort of went away. So let's rewind. Like, what, if you can remember what you guys were thinking, especially about like pivoting, bringing in revenue. You have a team, people that are relying on you, your friends and, work family. So what was it like back then?
It was like one of those back against the wall moments. It felt like that, because events are such a critical part to why our members join. A lot of us are traveling a lot. We want people to meet around, like all that shuts down, and it feels like a big part of our identity is just gone. Also, we had the biggest quit. What do you call it? Like, I don't know what the churn term is, but like 30 members quit like within a 1-week time frame. There was sort of a few weeks there where when the pandemic hit, everybody just went around and canceled all their subscriptions because you just don't know if your job's going to come back or whatever. A lot of our customers run agencies and businesses that everything just slammed on the brakes. So we immediately started thinking, we have to do something, and we started looking towards the remote jobs. So we already had a job board running for years at that point, and it was just kind of humming along in the background. And I think Ian and I zeroed in on that, and we were like, that's going to be our thing. We're going to take this job board to the moon. It's remote season. We're in a lucky situation. And yeah, I think it was like a weird mix of, it was terrifying on the one hand, but on the other hand, I was kind of like, this is kind of badass. I'm like excited for the challenge. And I think the team was too.
Okay. You're one of those people. You were like, all right, this is an opportunity, friends, right? All right.
It's like I'm comfortable in chaos. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. Not funny. My brother-in-law just got laid off. He had a job for like 26 years, and he was like, luckily, he was like, this is an opportunity. Maybe I can have like a second career or do something different. The alternative is panic and freak out. So I guess that's pretty good. You may as well move forward, right? So, okay, very good. And back in 2020, you did have the job board. Was it still internal inside the DC at that point, and then you brought it out?
No, the dynamitejobs.com probably was public for since late 2017. Our total revenue in 2019 was like $5,000. So I made $5,000 on my job board in 2019. That was my big opportunity in 2020.
Okay. And then, well, can you talk about the growth a little bit? And people can check out the archives at TMBA to hear about the growth. But yeah, so 2019 it was 5K. Talk about the growth after that.
What happened in 2020? It's going to be. I'm going to have to pull numbers out of my ass. I can't pull them up quickly, but it looks something like, maybe 200 and then 500 and then close to 1 million the next year. So we just put our effort behind that and just kind of pulled it out of nowhere. I guess just decided that, and I don't think it was a particular. I think one of the things that our previous episodes, or I don't know if we were talking on my show or yours, but it wasn't. I don't know. In retrospect, not the best business opportunity, but it was just like a kind of an example for me. If you're willing to just, I don't know, work hard and like follow the money and solve problems, that you can pay the rent, basically.
It's a perfect example of a reasonably good idea with good execution and a good team. And yeah, you guys hit $1 million. There was growth, like everything's good, right? Versus the best idea with horrible execution or, people not following through. So
yeah,
cool. Now you developed and sort of pivoted into the recruiting aspect too. So can you talk about maybe a precipitating event or conversation where you were like, we should do the recruiting piece, which is kind of a white glove recruiting service for the target customer overall, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's just, if you just kind of bang your head against the desk for 8 hours a day, we realized that our customers not only hated our job board, but they hated every job board. You know what I mean? It's like, so we kept trying to make like our job board the good job board. And sometimes it just turns out that like job boards suck. I remember we have like this incredibly talented CTO, and, we were building all these features and we had like hundreds of thousands of candidates, and we started calling it a platform and just all this, you know what I mean? Startup level delusion. And we were in this coaching call, and the coach kind of looks at us. He's like, wait a second. So you run a job board, right? And like, we kind of looked around the office, because I think we were doing one of those things where we were like explaining to him what we do. And he's like, job board. I think I got it, guys. And one of the things that made me think of is sometimes the best ideas are just duh. And sometimes you're just too clever. And I think what we were really doing was trying to make a jobs platform that didn't have the problem that all the other jobs platforms since the foundation of time had. And it turns out that there might be really good reasons why they have those problems. They might be, interminable, and we don't know why. And that's just life and business sometimes. But what we did discover was when we would talk to people using our job board, that we could really help them use it better, because we were the experts at running this job board. And it turns out that if you just get the right person on that call, you say, hey, Doug, like, I know you're going to post right now. Let me help you tweak some things. It's like, you know what? Do you mind if I just do it for you? Because I actually interview people better than you, and I can like find the red flags because I interview hundreds of people. And that just kind of one step after another, when we put a professional who really understood recruiting, it turns out founders were really willing to part with thousands of dollars to not have to go through the headache of posting on job boards like ours and others. It turned out to be such a kind of like a mental leap on the team to get away from this concept of platform that we actually just created a new brand. We called it Remote First Recruiting, because I really wanted to create this distinction of, hey, like, that's a job board. You know what I mean?
Right.
And like, what we discovered is that the repeatable source of clients that come our way, that respect our brands, they don't love job boards. They'll use them, but they don't love them. They love having an expert help them hire. And so that's really why we just, that was that key insight was like, oh, all these we were trying to solve the problems essentially in a way that was too expensive for our expertise to solve. Like, maybe like a team like Indeed could solve those problems, or you need a certain kind of scale or a certain amount of money. We really tried hard, but it was just a lot easier just to do the consultative path.
Got it. And I don't have a question.
I want to shout out to you, by the way. Okay. Doug spotted this like a year and a half in advance. So shout out to Doug.
Thank you. Well, and I was going to say, so not a question here, but I'll be interested on any remarks before we shift gears. There's so much I want to cover with you, Dan, but the sexy part of just the job board, the sexy part of Dynamite Jobs was it was software and scalable in a way that's different than a services business. And then when you shift over to services, the recruiting, it's time for money, right? So it's back to that equation, essentially, not your time probably, but the team's time, and you can't scale it in the same way. So any thoughts around that? I mean, it sounds like you realized the difficult problem that you were facing with Dynamite Jobs and the software aspect, the platform aspect.
Yeah, it's like the platform and the product delivery is scalable, but the customer acquisition process was not.
Yeah.
And typically there's in most business markets that are like somewhat established, the dynamic is going to be opposite and relative to each other. So the easier it is to acquire a customer, the less scalable the delivery will be. So like, if pressed, we could probably sell each other on something by the time we get off this call. You know what I mean? Like, hey, Doug, like, how about $250 an hour, 3 sessions? Like, I'll help get your podcast at the next level. I'll help whatever. Like, I'll find something. You know what I mean? Like, right. But that's going to take me a long time to deliver that product. And I can't find a bunch of, I can't do it a lot. I can't scale it. But the customer acquisition process, I just got to go to an event. I got to schedule a podcast. It's relatively straightforward. So that's essentially a dynamic that I've seen multiple times in my career. And in other words, like the sexier sounding a business idea is, typically the harder it is to execute.
That's a tweetable. That's good. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about working remotely versus working in person. So part of the, I guess, like core value of TMBA and all the business pieces is around like location independence and being able to work remotely and, kind of focusing on lifestyle. And I agree. I love working remotely. It's great for my personality type, and I have no issue with being down here in the basement working alone for a little while. No issue at all. But recently, and I know for the last few years, you and Ian and the team will come together. I don't know how much of the team, but you work in Barcelona, and there's certainly some value working, face to face, sitting next to each other, going on a walk, taking a break, going on a bike ride, whatever. So talk about the pros and cons of, remote working and why it's valuable to actually come together every now and then.
Yeah. I mean, I like that. There's a recent meme going around, which is like, you only know 2 things about a competitor. One is there's 4 co-founders sitting in a room together, and one is that they're on Zoom together. Who are you more scared of? I guess it depends on your industry, but certainly in tech, I'd be worried about the one room. Strangely enough, it could be the opposite if you're talking about a more traditional business. So if it were like a plumbing service, I might be more concerned about the remote enabled team. So maybe there's a story about competition and game selection there. But for me, we just onboarded a new events assistant community manager and events coordinator. And we took the time to spend 2 days co-working here in Barcelona. Absolutely invaluable for onboarding. It's invaluable for co-founders, executive relationships, people that you see that really have their hands on the steering wheel of your business. You got to get together with them in person. You got to make that investment. I think otherwise you risk losing too much traction and time. On the other hand, complete diminishing value to relocating your families, your whole life, just to sit in an office with somebody and essentially get bored of the conversation and need to go back down to the basement to do some work, after, call it, a week or 2 weeks. So I think that there's an organic rhythm to creative work, to building companies that, maybe isn't best exemplified by the traditional circumstance of co-location in an office or being virtual. I like these new ways forward where companies are finding a heartbeat, a tempo around team retreats, around executive retreats, around personal retreats, about finding ways to step a little bit outside of the grind to work on the business. So we've been exploring that kind of stuff. And Ian and I did that. Reorg was possible because we sat in an office, with interlocutors like yourself, essentially. I get off the phone with you, and then Justin Tan comes into the office and echoes some of the concerns that you had. And then we take these concerns and explore it, workshop it. And okay, it's only 12 team members and a handful of freelancers, but there's a lot of like historical narrative and momentum. And it takes a while to turn. And even in our case, it meant we had to turn over staff because the things that we needed to do changed.
Let's talk about meetings a little bit. So I came from a corporate background. There were so many fucking meetings. I can't even tell you the amount of double booked in at the time. Some of them were in person because we were in an office together, so you may as well meet. But generally, there was a lot of time wasted. A lot of them were unnecessary. And slowly over time, just before I got laid off, I was like canceling all these meetings. I'm like, let's trim everything down and just do the essential ones. And I think you're a fan of meetings now, which it seems surprising. So talk about where you are with meetings.
Incredible turnaround. Yeah. Well, so I, like you, have some level of PTSD about meetings. And I think so many of us do. We jump into online because we were doing that. Now we want to do this. And so we completely want to distance ourselves, maybe throw the baby out with the bathwater a little bit. A lot of meetings in larger orgs are about politics. They're about control. They're about things that aren't about necessarily keep moving the ball forward and living your best life. Here's the punchline though. And something I've been exploring is so many entrepreneurs avoid meetings for that reason, or they avoid getting great at them. They avoid building out a process. Meetings are probably, at least in the top, they're basically the most important process in any remote business. And so it doesn't mean you need to have a lot of them, but that's how you lead. That's how you lead in a remote team, is through meetings. And so make them great. That's the punchline. I think if you can really find a way to have effective meetings in a remote team, you save yourself and everybody else so much time. And that's why meetings are so powerful. I've really been thinking about them a lot lately because I see in our community, I see how much we suck at meetings. But then I also see the potential of them and the application of them in great companies. So there's also that, which is looking at companies which are highly effective, productive, and great, and how excellent it is to bring great minds together and to solve big problems. It doesn't happen on Slack. It just doesn't happen on Slack. So yeah, I've been really embracing this concept of meetings. Certainly minimum effective dose. We do this thing in our company a lot, where we have a meeting about meetings and then we delete a bunch of them. We change them up and fire forward. So I think every quarter you want to reevaluate your meeting tempo and everybody who's in them. And you want to have strong leadership when you're there.
How many meetings per week are you in, would you say?
Company meetings, I'm just going to pull up my calendar here. It's going to be 8. But here's the punchline. 4 of those are 15-minute meetings. And then there's 4 ones that are an hour.
Okay.
So I'm on the phone for 5 hours a week.
On meetings. All right. So can you highlight like the most important couple meetings? Is there one or two where you get the most leverage?
Right now, executive stand up, DC functional team call, that's huge leverage. And then the weekly team call is still really important to our company, where we do all hands every week. And that's an opportunity just to refocus, recircle. And this week, we started doing a 15-minute all hands kickoff where key weekly priorities go over. This is a bit of an adjustment. And then the rest of the 4 days, I'm doing an executive stand-up. So,
all right. And
am I triggering you?
yeah. Actually, yeah. Funny enough, when you said the weekly all hands, I thought back to like my first internship, and I was like, oh, I remember they brought donuts to entice us to come in there, and it worked, But some of those were not so effective. Now, love the stand-up meeting. My very first lead magnet when I started my blog was a one-pager, how to run a stand-up meeting. So I love you have the exact stand-up meeting. How do you run it, and who's in there?
So it's changed a lot. This week, we've completely switched. Everybody's done their own. We deleted the old stand-ups. There was 4 of us. Now it's just Ian and I, just because it depends on the projects for that quarter. And so we don't have it's just 15 minutes. Hey, what are you up to today? Big problems. And then we're out of there.
Okay. And then do you have...
So Ian's my business partner for those listening.
Yeah. So it's like, hey, what are you working on? Do you have issues? And then what's holding you up, right? That's the other thing.
Yep.
And then
the blockers. Yeah.
You tackle that. So I take it, hopefully most of the time there's no like major issues and you're like, someone else is, talking through this issue, or they own it or something like that. And then you guys typically don't have too many action items out of it, or do you got 1 or 2? How does that work?
I mean, the thing is like, sometimes we just hang out and want to talk to each other. So there's that too. Like, I think there's something about a remote team where creating an opportunity for people to build relationships and to co-work. So in other words, like, we don't really mind if we're not super disciplined. We don't need to be, because we're not spending all day long in meetings. This is like our one chance of the day or of the week to talk to each other. And so sometimes it's a lot of like jumping back on with someone after. It's like, oh shit, I didn't know we were going to do that project. Let's like sit. Sometimes I like to sit on the phone with someone for 30 minutes and write something with them or co-work with them. Everybody has like a little bit of a work buddy for like the few months projects they're working on, stuff like that. So we're not too militaristic about it. We're much more disciplined in the all hands. Like we want to get out of there in less than an hour and a half max, trying to get out of there in an hour. So we're really trying to move through all the key issues in the business and all the key updates so that over the weekend we have time to marinate. We do the kickoff call on Monday. And so those are our clear bookends of like, this is what's getting done this week. All hands kind of review at the end of the week.
Perfect. Love it. So meetings aren't all bad. You can make them work for you. And I have one-on-ones with the couple people that I work with, and it's great, to just build the rapport, have a relationship. And like, I understand now that I'm a little older and wiser that, you could shoot the shit for like 15 minutes and like, it's pretty valuable to have like the personal relationship. So. I
would say it's a really interesting thing to explore if you don't like your meetings. Like if you're, I mean, I've definitely felt this. Even when I'm like post accepted meetings, like I don't want to go to this meeting. That's a really great emotion to tap into. There's probably a lot of good stuff under that. Like you might not want to have that team member anymore. You might not need the meeting. You might want to change your role in the company. I would really, really sit with that. I love going to our all hands meeting. It's even crazy to say that out loud. I really look forward to seeing the whole team on Friday, and it feels like we're all together and we, bring together the key stories and moments in the week. And Ian, like, for example, a lot of people take 3-day weekends in our company. And when Ian and I are out, we always call each other. And it's like, how did the team call go? And we really want to know. And so I think finding a way to make meetings vital is a really great strategy if you're starting to grow a small team, is to really ask yourself, what are my agendas? What is the energy of this meeting? What is the purpose of it? How do I think about it the rest of the week? How do I populate the meeting with issues or content? Those sorts of questions I think are really valuable because they're tremendous leverage.
So let's start wrapping up here. I know we're running short on time.
Your audience is like, what are these guys talking about? It's
so deep. They're just listening over our shoulder. Yeah, as we're catching up. So over the last few years, I've been really part of the FIRE community. That's Financial Independence Retire Early. And I'm in Longmont, Colorado, where there's a bunch of lazy people that don't work. They've been retired for years. So it's kind of rubbed off on me a little bit. And as I have, worked on my business and grown it, and then realized like, hey, maybe I have enough, and maybe I don't have the same hunger that I did when I was in my 30s. I've been working less. My work week is about 3 days a week, most weeks, and I'm probably working, 10 to 15 hours or so. And it's just about perfect for my lifestyle and the other hobbies that I have, the other things that I want to do and like spend my time. And I take big chunks of time off as well. So over the summer, there have been weeks where I've worked ahead, and I'm like 4 to 6 weeks just kind of checking email and making sure like servers haven't, crashed and websites are up and that sort of thing. And it's been great. Like I feel less stress. I'm sleeping a little bit more. Everything's great. So like I'm at a good equilibrium at this point. And I actually felt like a little disconnected from Dynamite Circle in the DC because I went to an event. It's been a little while now, but everyone was talking about growth and working more and great systems they figured out. And they come around to me and say, "Hey, Doug, what are you into?" And I say, "I'm into working less." And it's just, it doesn't go along with the overall theme. And I'm like, I don't care about growth. Like I'm just trying to coast, which I'm like quiet quitting on myself, which sounds ridiculous, but that's exactly what's happening. So anyway, we had a little exchange, Dan, and part of that makes you a little bit nervous to step away. So I want to unpack it. Like, number one, what are your thoughts about my lazier approach? And really, I'm focusing on lifestyle. My value is on lifestyle and time. So any thoughts to me as a friend?
I think you're going to find a strong niche of DCers and of founders in general that is the end goal. And I'm incredibly supportive of. I think it's amazing. In fact, one tip for doing it, because I have done that lifestyle for some time, you could set, and it sounds like you do this to some degree, like you can set meetings with yourself for those critical elements of the business, whether it's, Monday morning for 1.5 hours, all critical systems, and then it's like, just, that's where what I love about meetings. This is a perfect way to say it, is like, if you have that meeting where you just touch everything critical, what is critical? I've touched it. I've logged into everything, man, the next 4.5 days feel different to me. I love that. I don't have strong opinions. I do think there's a strong cultural difference between people trying to go out there and get it and people trying to coast. Like that's not a good party vibe. I understand what you mean by that. because if people are really like kind of splaying themselves and pushing, and they're in this kind of sort of like, I want to grow my business era, they're pretty insufferable if you're just trying to have some balance in your life. I don't have any advice for you, honestly. I think it's really interesting, the idea of, it brings in the importance of investing and having a strong, because for me, the thing that concerns me the most is like decaying cash flows and things like that, and just making sure that you're mentally prepared for that. Because at least with active businesses, I think the concept of like passive income generating web assets are largely false. Typically it's, if you're not actively reinvesting with a high level kind of executive or ownership mindset into those things, they will decay quite fastly, like the majority of them. And so that's where that anxiety comes in. So if you're going to peel cash, make sure you're putting it into, assets that you feel really confident about, like your home and stuff like that. And if you got all that going on, I think it's absolutely fantastic.
Thanks. I think, it's interesting. Like you said, it's a different vibe. And I do love hearing about people that are excited about the business, but I felt, it's some form of like imposter syndrome where I'm like, am I in the wrong room? Like I seem underwhelming here, extremely underwhelming. So, but yeah, I know I do have the drive inside, and I think it may be one of those things where like a sabbatical, some time off, doing some other things, I'll get hungry again. And the thing is, I won't stop working, right? I like the things that I'm working on. It's just I'm peeling back to see like, oh, what happens if I'm testing? I guess I'm testing, and I know that some decay will happen, which we were chatting about like right before we started recording. I know revenue will go down, some other things will go down, but I'm checking to see how that feels when it happens, and then the actual results afterward. Because we could project, but we really don't know the real impact. So very cool.
I think it's incredibly interesting, and I applaud you for finding this middle way, where there's the growth. I think the shame with our like this, a lot of business culture is it's just so one dimensional, and unfortunately, I think, maybe a lot of people, they judge themselves, they see themselves that way, like they're as valuable as their number. And that's not why I got into this game, right? It's like, and that's not why I hang around with Ian, for example, is because he's a good guy. He's got like a lot of dimensions to him. And it's not about going out and, finding people who just want to sit at a desk 10 hours a day and convince everybody to give them money and just grow in order to really solve some problem that probably happened 25 years ago that has nothing to do with the current business anyway. So
Indeed.
I applaud that. I think that's the kind of core of the lifestyle business ethos, which is define what you want your life to look like and make sure that your business serves you and hopefully your clients too.
Dan, this has been fantastic. I have a blast chatting with you and listening to your podcast every week. So thanks. And where should people find you?
Likewise, Doug. Thanks for having me on. It's an honor. TropicalMBA.com. Check out the pod. It's weird. It's quirky. It's getting weirder. Maybe I'll go into full Dagaff Doug mode and just show up 1 hour a week. Yeah. No, that's for something for me, I guess, like my dream, like I guess my version of what you're achieving right now would ultimately be to spend more time doing writing and podcasting. We've taken on so much from an operational perspective that's been the focus, and it's been kind of a cool learning experience, but I'm hoping that my work will pay off and that ultimately I'll be able to spend more time writing.
Very good. Well, we will link up, and I'll link up to the other episode that we did together, and we'll talk to you soon, Dan.
Thanks, Doug.